When most of us think about a dog in the backyard, this is what we picture. We never really think about the dog that's tied or chained to a post or a tree. The truth is, neither Walton County nor the city of Monroe has passed leash laws that would totally outlaw any dog being chained up outside unattended. Today, I speak to the animal activist Unchain, Mona and Sally, who are fighting the way through the red tape and the politicians to change the laws.
Well, I started out, I used to volunteer at a couple of different animal controls, and I saw the worst of the worst coming in as far as dogs being abused, neglected, and just the overcrowding was incredible. Trying to find rescues, adopters, it was just a never-ending, and it still is, never-ending, worry. And anyway, so every once in a while, a special, they're all special, but a dog that had been very abused would come in, and they kind of really take your heart. There was one pit bull named Addie that came into the shelter, and she literally was burned, pretty much all her body. And she became my passion. I had to help her. And I finally, we found a rescue, but the rescue was up in Canada, and so Addie needed a local foster. And all of a sudden I found out there was a foster, and I was so happy, and so I had to find this foster's name, and I called her. Just so happened to be this lady here who lives 10 minutes away from me. And so I went to meet her, and we've been inseparable ever since.
We have the same passion for sure.
Yes.
And the Unchained Walton, that came out of cruelty to animals, being chained or tethered to a post or tree.
Yeah, neglect, cruelty, yes.
Tell us about some of the worst that you've seen, and why this is important.
Okay, you want to talk about that?
Yes. Basically, when we started driving around Walton County and Monroe predominantly, we noticed chain dogs everywhere. It was kind of shocking because we didn't even have to look hard. Mm-hmm. So we started taking down addresses of the dogs that looked like they were pretty neglected and had no water, that the shelter was not adequate, that type of thing. But what we found is every time we drove the streets, we would find 6, 7, 8 dogs in need in about a half an hour. But there's a couple instances that stand out. One dog was at the end of a residential road on its side, and we didn't know if it was sick or dead. Turned out it was dead, with people inside the home, cars all parked there. And the dog had been dead either for several days or had an untreated tumor for quite some time because it was bloated. Those kind of things you never forget, because the dog died on a chain with people inside the home. That's not okay. And even though we have ordinances, sometimes these folks are not charged. Sometimes when they're charged, even when it goes to court, they are not given any type of punishment that is suitable for letting your animal die on a chain while you have ignored it. So anyway, we have a few instances. We have a couple other dogs that were kept in a gully that we located on December 31st last year.
Yeah, New Year's Eve.
New Year's Eve, and that was a bad situation. Basically, we were told by a resident nearby that dogfighting was going on nearby. So 5 weeks later, the court date came up, and the dogs were finally impounded by animal control. But for 5 weeks, they stayed in the gully without proper shelter and really bad weather. So it's that kind of frustration that we have, because when you notice an animal suffering, you want to do something about it soon and ASAP. So anyway, luckily those dogs have gone on. One has a home and one is in a foster out of state. But the amount of pit bulls that are abused in Walton County, specifically pit bulls, and we love all dogs, is pretty astounding. And we would like to do something about the fact that it's nonstop breeding. People breed them for quick cash. They don't have to get a breeding permit. They don't have to get a business license. And then the taxpayers of the county, they foot the bill. When those dogs enter the shelter, when they hurt someone, when they go around stray and get pregnant and puppies go everywhere, it becomes a public safety problem and it becomes a taxpayer issue.
What is the solution, do you think, with the pit bull?
Well, I think that, we've talked about this a lot. We're doing research for even what other states are doing, but we feel that anybody who wants to breed any dog, but especially a pit bull, needs to have a county or a city business license, a breeder permit. Now, just because you get a breeder permit does not mean you can breed. If the shelter is killing pit bulls at the time that you think you want to breed your dog, the shelter, whoever gives out the permit, should say no, not right now. Like a moratorium almost. Let's have a moratorium on breeding pits. What's wrong with that? There's got to be a way to control this problem. We don't have all the answers, but we're working hard to come up with good solutions. We know mandatory spay-neuter doesn't work, but why not require permits? Make it a little more difficult for these people. Have their business license posted on the outside of their door, and be accommodating if code enforcement wants to come in and inspect their property because they are a business.
Would you say that most dogs that are chained or tethered are mistreated?
Well, kind of. Yeah. They're usually they're living in the back all by themselves. We see it. The green water, if any water, they're lonely. They're dying for attention. Most of them have heartworms. They get no attention whatsoever. Now, I'm not saying every dog, but the majority, when they're chained in a backyard, there's a reason, or a front yard.
One thing that we've always told the commissioners is that we are not trying to tell people that they can't put their animals out on a tether when they're happy and healthy and enjoying the day. We're talking about dogs that live in a circle of mud. Their waste is everywhere. Again, their water is usually in a 5-gallon bucket that's either knocked over, frozen, or black and green. So this is what we're talking about. We're talking about a dog that's fed every few days. These dogs, several of them we come across have kind of given up on life. Mm-hmm. Others are so upset about being on a tether. They're very, very unsocialized, and they're dangerous. Mm-hmm. It's a big public safety risk. A lot of kids in Georgia have been attacked. A lot of adults have. We have an adult in Loganville that was attacked by a chain pit. Again, it's all breeds that are chained, but it just happens to be in Walton County. 95% of the dogs that are chained are pit bull breeds. And we feel that dog ownership is a privilege. It should come with certain responsibilities. And one thing that we have found, and this is factual, is that a chained, neglected dog in the yard is a sign of other problems in the home. We have had 2 instances where we begged and begged and begged for the dogs to be checked on, and when they finally had the police involved, they had charges of child abuse, elder abuse, and criminal activity with drugs. The thing is, beyond it becoming a public safety issue and a taxpayer issue, property values are lowered. Mm-hmm. No one wants to live next door to someone who gets a dog, chains it up, puts up the no trespassing sign, and then does their thing. It's a property value thing.
Who and what is against this happening in Walton County? Who are your obstacles?
Well, basically, as far as the no tether, the commissioners are the ones that have been our problem. We've given them so much information. We've given them books this thick showing all the reasons that tethering is bad, chaining is bad. They just, I don't know. We don't know why they do not want this. We don't know.
Walton is one of the few metro Atlanta counties that does not have a 24/7 unattended tether ban. Athens Clark has had theirs for over 10 years. DeKalb and Fulton have had theirs for over 10 years. Gwinnett, it's probably been about 3 years.
Hall County.
Hall County. And then when you research, several counties in Georgia that are very rural even have it. So it's a county thing. Some cities do it. But despite what the county does, some cities have tether bans. And, yes, they can't be enforced all the time, but it's a start. It's a start. And we also want to get in the schools and educate, because, again, if a child is taught to treat an animal correctly, hopefully we will not see this kind of problem 10, 15, 20 years from now.
Right.
I know some of the commissioners are worried about that seeming like a tax. More money into animal control will help with enforcement if they can hire more officers. And some cities charge $10 for dogs that aren't fixed. But if you're going to breed your dog in an area where there are strays and dogs at the shelter being euthanized on a routine basis, you should have to go to your county, get approval for that, pay a fee, and then that way they can inspect your home, see what's going on. Because the pit bulls that are being bred at a very alarming rate in Walton,
In City of Monroe.
they're not necessarily going to decent homes. They're not being vetted. They spread parvo. It's a quick cash thing. Usually make about $200 per puppy, and a mother can have 12 puppies, sometimes more, twice a year.
And what do you say to the people that say that if you take them off of their tether or their chain, they're going to be loose in the neighborhood? And these people that do this are not going to build a fence.
The people we approach, we have put up several kennels. We put up 20 by 20 kennels. We do everything we can to help.
In Walton County, you cannot call animal control anonymously. So what happens is many people who are super frustrated and heartbroken about something going on next door don't call because they're afraid of retaliation. There's two folks that I recently called animal control about, of course using my name, and this is in the past few months, and two of them have contacted me to find out what did I want to know, why did I get involved, and that kind of thing. That's a little disconcerting. Honestly, I love animals enough that I don't really care. But a lot of people do care. So the whole not being able to report anonymously is bad. Most metro counties will allow that. So that's definitely been a tough thing. But back to your question about what will people do that are not going to put up a fence. As Mona said, we have offered discount fencing panels to folks. But another thing is this, and hopefully again as years go by, people will realize that owning a dog is a responsibility, comes with great responsibility, and bring it inside at night and it with you. Put it in a large crate if you need to. Have it be part of the family. We're talking about 24/7 unattended tethering. We're talking about getting a big boat chain, putting it on the dog's collar, and leaving it there for its lifetime. That's what we're talking about. There are so many different things that you can do for an animal to take care of it well. People need to go back to walking their dogs. If you don't have a fence, walk your dog. Walk your dog. There are a lot of different ways that you can take care of your pet without chaining it, but mainly if your only option is to chain the dog, don't get the dog.
Yeah. The chaining and backyard breeding, they kind of go hand in hand also. So they both need to be addressed. They're both critical problems in Walton, in the city of Monroe, both.
After speaking with Mona and Sally, I decided to head over to Animal Control and talk with Bill Wise. I asked Bill, is there a problem in Walton County and the city of Monroe with tethered dogs?
Yeah, I would say we've got kind of a whole range of problems, from tethered dogs to even dogs that aren't tethered. Unfortunately, when you add that human factor, someone can neglect a dog just as bad in a pen or in a house as they do on the chain. However, the dogs on the chain, one of the big problems is that they're just sitting out there and not able to escape maybe another dog that comes to the property to attack them, or interactions with wildlife. So there's definitely that factor there, among others.
Do you see that most tethered dogs are pits in the county?
That would be real difficult to say. As far as our intake goes, it's just over a quarter of the dogs that come in are pit bull mix. Now, I don't know if that's just because there's more of them in the county, or if it's just something with that breed that the owners aren't caring for them as much as with other breeds. So it's really hard to say. I don't have really specific statistics on, how many dogs are tethered and what breed they are. But I just anecdotally, you can ride through the city and you'll see a lot of chained up pit bulls.
Compared to other animal shelters in neighboring counties, does Walton County have a problem with pit bulls? Do you see a lot of that?
No, I wouldn't say so. I've been doing animal control for 23 years. When I first started in the late 90s, there was a lot of chows and chow mixes. And then we had shepherds. Before that, before I was in the 80s, it was Dobermans. And then it just seems like for the last 10, 15 years, it's been pit bulls. I worked 10 years at another county in Georgia. Same thing, seemed like the kennel was full of pit bulls and chihuahuas all the time. I worked 3 years in Virginia. The area we were in, which wasn't far from where Michael Vick was living, was a lot of pit bulls. So I wouldn't say it's anything unique to Walton County.
And as far as a pet owner goes, someone who tethers their dog, is that someone who is not responsible as someone who has one fenced in or keeps it in the house?
Not necessarily. There's a lot of times, especially when I worked in another jurisdiction, we had a high population of students that were renting, and they had dogs, and of course they either couldn't build a fence on their landlord's property, or didn't have the funds to build a fence. And so on a nice day, they'll put their dog out on a tether, and everything was fine. And with the ordinance that we have now, where it requires an adequate chain, an adequate collar, food, water, shelter, I think if someone's abiding by that there shouldn't be a problem. Like I said, you can neglect a dog on a chain just as much as you can in a pen. One of my worries, is that we pass a law, but we haven't changed the human side of it. And a lot of those dogs will be taken from a tether and put in a small makeshift pen made of pallets. And so a lot of what I think needs to be done is getting the word out to the community. Passing laws helps, but really this needs to be a public education campaign. It's hard to believe we're almost at 2020 and still have these issues where people can't even get a simple rabies vaccine, but that's where we're at. And it really needs to be down on the grassroots level, like the Unchained group is trying to educate pet owners. Sometimes it's education, sometimes it's just helping them out, and then other times, we have to step in with the citations.